All right, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our master series here at CoLab. These are periodic sessions that we host out of our CoLab, and it's a way to bring, really thought leaders together and talk about leading edge industry technologies or topics or challenges, and really come up with, great content to start to think about how we can really move the needle in our business. And today, I'm really excited. This is going to be really cool. So today, we're lucky enough to sit down with Amy Marks. Amy is the head of industrialized construction strategy and evangelism at Autodesk. And I've had some time to talk with Amy, and her passion about this topic absolutely comes from every piece of her being. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get started with Amy, just quick safety moment. We like to start everything off with a safety moment, really try to make it relevant. And today, we're here in the Mid-Atlantic. We had a lot of snow for the Mid-Atlantic over the last couple days, and now it's nice and warm. And, in order for a safety moment to really take hold, it's got to be relevant. Well, it was relevant for me today that when you're in these conditions, you got to realize everything above you starts to slide off of roofs, especially if you're not used to it. And so as you're walking around in the Mid-Atlantic or even in the Northeast where some of this really heavy snow has come in the last couple of days, make sure you're paying attention to what's above you and what's around you, because quite often it could be coming and you don't even see it. So hopefully that's a relevant topic for a lot of people and something that you could really take use of. So from an AIA perspective, for all of our architect friends out there, we are now an accredited provider. So this session will be worth 1 learning credit. So congratulations. Hopefully it's worth that 1 learning credit at the end. So some of our objectives from really a broad perspective is we're going to really define and look at the spectrum of available prefabricated workflows, right? So what does that really mean? So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to really break down that process, start looking at changes across all the different building types, all the different components that go into it, and really how those challenges are dragging the business down to a place where we really haven't seen much productivity out of it. We're going to talk about the benefits and the hurdles of what is in the industrialized workflow and really kind of explain what that term and a few other terms mean within this new vision of our business. And then really we're going to pick Amy's brain about, strategic approaches, and we're going to enable concepts. And it really kind of scales across all parts of our business, whether you're an end user or an owner, you're an owner's rep or construction management professional, you're a design professional, engineering professional, or a trade contractor. It really touches all. And things such as DMFA, if you don't know what that is, you're going to really understand it by the end of this. And hopefully we're going to spark some fire in your brain to really think about how each and every one of us can apply some of this concept to really pushing the industry past that. So we're going to plant those seeds, and hopefully there's going to be a lot more to come. So with that, let's talk to Amy. So Amy, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role. I'm excited to hear what's going to happen today.
Awesome. Yes, I work for Autodesk. I came out of conventional construction and then owned my own fabrication facility, doing a lot of prefabricated assemblies, and then was a consultant for about 10 years, helping big end users and big governments and big contractors enable prefabrication. So what I do at Autodesk is I inform both company strategy internally as well as product strategy, and I work externally with our customers to help them in things like enabling design for manufacturing and assembly or prefabrication with everyone across the ecosystem, like big owners and contractors and architects and subcontractors. So that's what I do. My job is basically my dream job, to be honest.
No doubt. And you come from like a long line of building, that's for sure. So no doubt your expertise across it. I mean, and I think for all those that know a lot of the friends that hit contracting and all that's on there, Amy's fun fact, which just happened to be, completely coincidental, is that you were Peter Lanfranci's next door neighbor. Is that correct?
I was growing up, actually, as a little kid. My dad still lives in that house, actually.
So if we got enough time, we'll save a section at the end to just talk about Peter as a kid. I'm just kidding. But no, it's really fun to see that like all this comes together, right? So,
yeah.
Okay, let's let's get everybody on the same page as it relates to definitions, and let's explain when we talk about ecosystem and how all these things come together.
Yeah, I think maybe a good place to start is at slides 3 and 4, maybe, or 6 and 7 now, actually, just to help everybody out in the space. Just to give them an understanding of what we're talking about here. So
Okay.
I think, look, everything has really changed in the world right now. And if you don't recognize that, I like to talk about it like convergence, right? So you're seeing lots of things converge. You're seeing, construction converge with manufacturing. You're seeing process converge. You're seeing different societal issues and things converging. For you guys that are in the data center world, we've seen the subsea and data center industries converge. You're seeing all this happening, right? And a big technology convergence is going on, but a lot of it in our space is around the design make side of it. And so I think you've been seeing prefabrication happening for many years because of that. And I'll tell you a little bit, if we go to the next slide, how you want to talk about that, both with your internal and probably your external organizations, right? So I'm a lean practitioner, lean manufacturing practitioner, I should say. I do understand lean construction, but I'm a much more aligned with the manufacturing side. So industrialized construction, this is almost like the house that Toyota built. This is the house that industrialized construction built. And there are foundational things that you really do need to understand, things like how IoT is going to be changing our world through things like productization and responsive buildings, and being able to understand the big data and analytics we'll get from those buildings, and how that information needs to be organized and compute so that we can utilize it in the cloud to be more resilient, but also faster and really connected. And then, process enablers like lean manufacturing and building information modeling. You already touched upon design for manufacturing and assembly. That's the design choices we make as architects and engineers that actually enable the next level in the house, which is the physicality of prefabrication. And that's, advanced building products that reduce drying time, curing time, hot work welding. I always like to use blaze frame as a great example. That's intumescent tape on track, and instead of having messy fire caulk, I get smeared in half the tube and then I put it in the garbage. I just buy blaze frame on track from the manufacturer, and I just fasten it into the ceiling, right? So that's a good example of an advanced building product. But single trade assemblies, which we've been seeing for many years, as well as multi-trade assemblies, a little known fact, if you didn't read some studies that were out recently, is that 3/4 of MEP subcontractors in the United States over the last 3 years have experience with multi-trade assemblies, many, many more with single trade. And 2/3 of general contractors also have experience integrating multi-trade assemblies. So these are a lot, and that single multi-trade part, it's like the things that are underground, behind the walls, above the ceilings. I like to say sometimes my general contractors don't even know that they're there, but they've been there for about 20 years, and we're just seeing more and more of those come to fruition. But then there's volumetric modules, which are actually the building. And I think everyone kind of uses the word modular as if it encompasses all those other things in the continuum. And if you notice, there's also no hierarchy. Sometimes modular is the worst tool in the toolbox for you to use, and we want to use different pieces and parts in the multi-trade and single trade. Sometimes volumetric modules, if they're embedded with some of those other prefabrication continuum elements, are the right things to do. But they're not, one is not better than another. And then obviously we want to apply advanced building techniques to those like robotics and automation and additive manufacturing. By no means is this supposed to be an exhaustive list, but I do think that if we're going to speak about this, we have to sort of get on the same page. You know what I mean? So this is the language that I teach and talk in.
Right. And, it's interesting. We have, I think every part of the ecosystem is represented, listening today. So you have all different components, and a lot of that goes into those discussions, like, how do I play a role into this, right? And that's one of the conversations you and I have had. And really, what prefab is a term that's obviously used almost holistically, and like you said, a lot of that interchanges. But really, prefab is sort of what you're saying is the building block for really where the industry needs to take us, right? And so, seeing how this is going to play out and see how this context is coming together, I think for us is really where we want to help shift the industry, and how does each player sort of play a role in that? And so that productization, I think, is going to be integral, and having sort of level set everybody in that same space will be important.
It is. And by the way, I think maybe I would skip actually 2 slides ahead to 9, just like we're kind of having a conversation. So I brought a few things to show while we're talking.
Right.
So if you don't recognize it, this is what's happening right now. Like I can tell you, I've been in this business for a long time, as you mentioned. I'll be 50 this year. By the way, Craig Levine, who works with you, is one of my best friends on the planet. I have more funny stories about him than Peter, probably. Just for the record, if anyone wants.
We'll take those too, so no problem.
Yeah, any leverage, you just come to me, but you couldn't get a better guy. But so
Right.
if you look at this slide, and Craig knows I've been in this business for my whole life, it was much harder for me to talk about this because people weren't as interested as they are now, right? But that's because there's this unbelievable pressure right now on the ecosystem. And I use the word ecosystem on purpose because you're in the construction industry potentially, and someone else is in the architecture industry, and somebody else is in the manufacturing industry. But together, you combine all those things, and the owners, whatever industry they're part of, that's this ecosystem that we have. And there's tremendous pressure because we have serial owners right now asking for this. All the data center clients, all the healthcare clients, anybody that has heavy MEP integration is asking for this, right? And worse than asking, they're requiring it, right? They're saying, like, if you're going to build my data center or my hospital, I want X% to be built utilizing prefabrication and industrialized construction, right? So if you go back one slide, that is where all the money's spent right now, and you'll recognize it when you see that that Vice slide again. So you've got all the serial owners that are actually asking for it. You've got, sort of governments, especially after COVID, they're asking for 3 things for restarts. They want BIM, they want the understanding of sustainability, especially through carbon, and they want industrialized construction for certainty, right? And they also need to be in safer environments. So they're looking at those 3 things. And then you have like all these cool, sexy stories, many of which we talked about, a few that I've worked on that get front page attention. And a construction company might see that and say, like, well, if that little quirky company can do that, why can't we do that? Or some owner sees somebody else is doing it and they're like, I want to have that. And those give us a lot of value, but then you need to know how to get to what happened on the front page of the New York Times. But ultimately, on the other side of the Vice, you have subcontractors that have truly been recognizing the value of fabrication for many, many years. And they will hopefully be the rise of the new manufacturer within our ecosystem, along with the building product manufacturers kind of seeping into being more vertically integrated. And all that combined with the fact that we're more global and we can see lowering barriers to entry because we can learn, but it has really been squeezing those 2 central core personas, those industries of architecture and design and engineering, as well as the general contracting community. Now, I've talked to your president. Luckily, you're ahead of the game in some ways because you are thinking about new ways of building things and integrating stuff and making this, working through a connective platform of making sure that you can do all this stuff. Moving make information really up into design is a big part of it. But others that are not thinking about how their roles change is not just, sort of paper CMs or bidding, buddies and things like that. It's like now you have to really think about how do you become a true systems integrator? And some of them are obviously integrating fab into that. So they're becoming manufacturers and systems integrators. And by the way, so are the architects. I have architects opening up fab shops. And they're getting squeezed because they're like, how do I know how to design for all these pieces and parts? So there's a lot of pressure right now on the space to be better.
Right. Yeah. And I think, like everything else, if keeping the client, as the first and foremost of how is this going to benefit the client and what does this really drive, the biggest 2 challenges that really impact the client are schedule certainty and cost certainty, right? And it's very simple when it comes to that. And an analogy which doesn't align perfectly, but does start to give you that mindset as you think about the automobile industry, right? When you buy a car, they don't show up with boxes and boxes of parts in your driveway and put it together, and then you get a car.
Right.
It's a much more systematic approach, and there's much more cost certainty. Now, there's still a huge variety that you can work through, but that business model has changed, and it gets to that truly advanced stage of robotic implied manufacturing, and then you start to level some of the technology on top. And we talk about the platform approach, right? And how all those things start to pull together are really where where you start to really pull the value back into it. And
yes.
It's an interesting time, right? And so talk to me about why now is this starting to move and starting to shift in thought process.
I'll tell you, if you go to slide 12, what you just described, by the way, I wish we were in person because I'd love to see the raise of hands of every contracting guy or designer, anyone out there that's just like, are buildings like cars? And like, I swear, I feel like anytime somebody said, by the way, I used to talk about cars all the time. VW has a chassis system. it's the same, and 40 different cars are built on the same chassis system.
Exactly.
Right? Like we know that, we hear that, we're like, that makes sense. And then I go, I have no idea how that equates to my building, right? It's like Nike has bespoke Nikes you can get online, and there's like, you can combine any combination of laces and soles and fabrics and colors, and you can go online and have mass customization for shoes. And we go, see, Mr. Contractor and Designer, it's possible. And then they go, but that's a shoe. They like totally don't get it at all, right? So I feel like, or they shut off from listening almost, like, and they shouldn't, because you're not wrong. Everything you said is 100% right. But I think it's the difference of where we've been at. And honestly, you have to first recognize that we've been fabricating for 20 years now. By the way, I bought a volumetric steel and concrete modular company in 2000, early 2000s. It was a 75-year-old company. They built embassies, telecoms, data centers, every public school in New York. Like, trust me, it's been around a long time. But like, it's not new. None of this is new. But what is different now is this conversation I've been having for a couple of years now about prefabrication versus productization. Now, I know those are not shoes and those are not cars. We've all seen these on job sites, right? The one on the left happens to be HT Lions, and that's a central utility plant. You can get them from them, you can get them from EAS, you can get them from TAS, you can get them from Envirosep, Visticon. You can buy those from, I would call them central utility plants are us, right? You can pretty much buy them anywhere these days. Not many times are they used when they should be, because your mechanical contractor doesn't always want to give up that scope, right? And he doesn't want you to go to some manufacturer. He's like, wait, that's where I make all my money. Don't go away from that. And then I tell all those guys, hey, you should start manufacturing like these other manufacturers have done, and start turning these fabricated elements. And the difference with fabrication is that they're typically done somewhat after the fact. Maybe we got somebody who knows how to build those with the DFMA principles sort of up to the front of the process. That's the whole notion of IPD. It's like our only big invention is we get people to the front of the process, like so far, right? Like one of the biggest things we talk about. But by the way, that guy is now, I'm 50, he's probably 60 or 50 or whatever, not so young. We're gonna die out. And like, in reality, we wanna retire and I wanna go somewhere nice. How do you get that DFMA information about how to do that central utility plant like you see on the left, so that I can apply machine learning and AI and actually machine tools in my shop to make a better version of that? And that's a great version from HT Lions, don't get me wrong. But how do I productize that like a generator you see on the right? Because no architect in the world thinks about when they need power and scalable capacity. They don't actually put down their, like, quote unquote, pen to paper and say, you know what, I know Kohler makes a 200 and a 250 and a 300 horsepower, but I don't care. I want a 217 and a half, and I'm gonna design that. Nobody does that.
Right.
Don't do that, because a generator is truly a scalable product with capacities and performance. It's drawn in a particular way that we can drag and drop it into our drawings, and some connected, hopefully, through Revit. But we are fabricating currently, and that's why we're talking about the process is broken, because it's siloed. But in reality, I have glimmers of hope that, like, again, the generator is something we use every day, and it's not a siloed process. We have certainty around it. You may not like it. By the way, it may be long for, what you want or cost, but we certainly, we know what it is, you know what it costs, you can go buy it, your owner can buy it. You don't have to buy it for them. We probably have, international contracts for it. It's decoupled. So I think what's stopping us is not just the fact that we have to shift our mindset away from project centricity and how we make money in our silos and our projects to the long game. And by the way, it's great when I talk to you, Drew, like, and that you have an R&D center, that you have people whose day job is it to really be focusing on this. That sets you apart, right? So it's not, I always ask that when somebody's like, oh, I work in prefabrication in our company. I go, is that your day job? This is my first thing I ask them. Wow, is that your innovation? Is that your day job? Like, what do you do? Well, no, I'm a project manager, but I'm like, you don't have time to be doing this if you're a project manager. You have to stop and separate this out, right?
And that's the challenge, right? How do you separate, and how do you really invest and put the capital? So, one of the things the term that you keep mentioning, and I think it's part of the ecosystem of really our design partners, right? DFMA. Let's spend a few minutes explaining, when you say DFMA, what am I taking away from that? What do I want to do? What am I looking towards?
So I think first you have to know that we didn't make that terminology up, right? So it's literally based in manufacturing. So there's the ease of manufacturing, design for ease of manufacturing, and we concatenated that with design for ease of assembly. So it's called DFMA now, right? And so it basically means you need to understand when you design that element, that central utility plant, or you're using some product, how to best enable that. So let me give you why that's so hard. I could say, like, we should all do DFMA, and every architect could be like, yes, I need to embrace DFMA, right? I teach 9 principles for what I call generic DFMA, like design it once, use it many times, design it for safety, design things for multi-use. There's like 9 of them. The problem is, like, let's take a really simple prefabricated element like a precast panel. This is a true story. I know a precast system because they were at Autodesk University 2 years ago. And the gentleman said, he didn't use the terms DFMA because he didn't know them, but he showed an Excel spreadsheet and he said, these are the 55 instructions for my precast wall system that if you follow, I will give you max discount on my product. If you only follow 50 of them, I'm going to give you less of half that discount. And if you follow less than 45, it will be more expensive. Don't use my stuff, right? Because it will not prove out what you're doing. Now, that sounds great. It's good that he knows what those DFMA principles are, and hopefully he'll productize that one day. But think about a building. Think about all the elements that you could decouple and productize and prefabricate. No architect or engineer in the world should be expected, or general contractor doing design build, to understand 55 times every piece and part times every proprietary system that's out there. And then, by the way, even if you could, what's the right combination of those? We need to understand these products in terms of things like computational design, so we can use tools that exist today like generative design and actually have the information tell us and give us freedom for architecture so we can spend the time where we need to, or freedom to coordinate the parts of the building that aren't productized to get the right combination of those pieces and parts that are for whatever, I will say most efficient, but whatever the parameters are you set, the best, daylighting, the best way to work with the behavior with the user interface, whatever that is, right? Sustainability for carbon, cost, schedule, all those things. Those are sort of like easy ones, right? So we need to be able to start thinking about productization. It's like putting down an artificial reef in an ocean, right? It's like, it's chaos out there. Water's everywhere. It's the minute you put down a product, things start to order themselves around it. Like ecosystems build themselves around that certainty of that generator, right? That's why we design around that generator and not, pour generator water over our building. You know what I mean? We have to have these anchors.
Right. And so if I was speaking for maybe my clients or my design partners, or even myself who likes to build some really building the cool, different stuff is really part of what, keeps you motivated and juiced up. So am I losing that through this focus, this revolution, this push? Am I losing that ability to be unique in what I'm designing or what I'm looking to build for my employees?
I would say go to slide 16. I put this in when our usually ask me, it's not design filters, but you go to 16, I have a friend that I make fun of when I show this building. I'm like, if you productize, the one right before that, I go, if you productize, not every building looks like this. You know what I mean? And as proof of that,
that's the fear, right? That's the fear.
First of all, I always see the other example. I don't know any architect that wants to draw fire stairs. Let's start with productizing the things you like to build and draw the least. Okay, I'm not asking for you to change massing or I want you to start with the things you don't care about. And by the way, we already are there. It's below the seal, above the ceilings, below ground, behind the walls, things that nobody really, they have performance requirements. But honestly, you've already given up on those anyway. We just draw them for intent up here. They get thrown in the garbage, and then some general contractor gives them mostly to the MEP contractors that actually redraw them. So we have both physical and digital waste in that process, right? So everybody knows. Don't tell anybody. I'm like, wait, everybody knows. What do you mean? It's no one's going to give up drawing stuff they get paid for unless you stop this nonsense. Somebody has to, and by the way, that means ask for products, design products, create products they can use up front, integrate products. We all have to move in this direction. So not every building looks like this in a productized world, by the way. So click to the next slide and I'll tell you why. So I'm redoing my house top to bottom from right now. And I am buying a sound system. So I'm divorced. I'm a single woman. I'm not really that into music and things like that. But so I feel like that you give that up in your head as a woman. I don't know how to put even the cable box together at this point in my house, over years and years. But I've been researching about Sonos because I'm I do want to have music in my house. And I'm let me look at the products that are available that I can do myself, right? Make it easier for me. And there's Sonos, and you just go through a little configurator of what's in your rooms and what you want. And that's easy and it's fairly inexpensive, right? That's the gray building we just saw. If you're fine with having a gray building, you can certainly buy one. No one's going to stop you, right? Sonos is great, by the way. But if I want, and if I was really, I don't want to make a gender, there are probably lots of women that love the art of sound. If you really want the art of sound in your house, you can go down to the very expensive sound consultant in my town, and I'm sure that person will say to you, Tell me about the spaces. Is vinyl important to you? What do you think the future of what you're going to be listening to? And how big are the rooms? And what do you want the feeling to be like? And do you like the feeling when you feel bass in your stomach versus like behind you or whatever, right? And I will give him all the performance and, behavioral criteria of everything I want it to do today and what I'd like it to grow into and how that feeling should be, all these cool things. And he goes, no problem. Trust me, it's much more expensive than Sonos. He spends 85% of his time organizing products. He doesn't build speaker wire. Trust me on that one. There's no way they're manufacturing the speaker wire or the amplifiers or any of these,
Right.
He doesn't make record players. But he can then spend the 15% of his time first setting the parameters and getting the right selection of products that it organizes itself nicely. He can then spend the time going, she has a really pretty girly house. She's not going to want that black speaker in the middle of her living room. I have to build her a custom cabinet that looks like white and silvery and girly because Amy won't want that in her space. So let me spend my time making her happy with this aesthetics and this stuff. And the performance, by the way, took care of itself with the products. But I want architects to be freed of fire stairs, and I want them to truly spend the experience on what the certainty of what they got at. I know what all those products cost, so does he, right? The only variable then becomes how beautiful I want that thing to be that they have to custom make. But like I get certainty of cost, certainty of, schedule, because we know the lead times of all this equipment. And then we get to really spend the time on my experience in the room of the art of sound, of how I hear things and what I want and when I want to add to it. And I really think that that should resonate with architects because I'm truly going to empower you to spend the time. I have a friend, he's the marketing director of a big pet company retailer. He said, we're talking to our architects right now, and I'm talking about how the customer, the pet, feels in the space. Do they feel safe? I go, what architect has time to deal with that when he's drawing fire stairs? I'd rather you spend time talking about the feeling of that pet, the colors you're using, the way in which the entrance works for them. If it's safe, does the pet feel safe? Does the owner feel safe? Do they want to spend more money? Do they like the experience? We don't have time for that as architects right now because we're redrawing the generator as a 217.5 most of the time, right?
Right. And then reviewing a shop drawing on it, and then reviewing the field and trying to figure out, and just like the waste just keeps continuing to generate, right?
I was going to say,
that's a challenge.
It's challenging. But by the way, we have to stop it. And it's not that no one's smart and that we don't get it and that we're not spending money digitizing. It's that we are in a cash for chaos ecosystem. Period. Right. We are making money on the lack of information or disconnected information in the silos. Every single one of the silos makes money in that way. And until you have the biggest influencers, the serial owners, actually, that's why I came to Autodesk, the ecosystem influencers, to change that to better.
Explain what Autodesk is doing, because there's a couple questions that we'll go through, but one of them is specifically about, what's your, Autodesk platform? What is it? How do you integrate to that overall strategy? And I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, if you go to slide 18, I think I can explain it better, maybe, on our combined deck now. So there's product. This is about software product now, not the physicality of the generator product we were talking about. Everybody knows what a software product is. It works by itself. It's challenging graphics to it. A platform is not for the benefit of the people that have the anchor portfolio products, like you have Revit and AutoCAD and Autodesk Construction Cloud, and we have PlanGrid obviously within that and Building Connected. And our manufacturing software, by the way, most of my general contractors and fab guys want to do the manufacturing software aligned with this. But we have anchor products. If you go to the next slide, a platform is not just about a portfolio of products from one company. It's about how do you enable an ecosystem of lots of products, including our anchor products. And by the way, I can tell you, if you want the vision of what I just talked about, I used to teach process. I came to tech because tech makes process and information sticky, right? It stays around for a long time. I came here because unless you're using the baseline product portfolio products, which I am working, and everyone at the moment is working on connecting them through this ecosystem and other partners and competitors outside in this ecosystem, you can't actually get to the vision that we just described. And so you may find we were talking about this earlier, you may find a really cool piece of software that does a sliver of the connective tissue of start to finish. And you're like, nobody does that sliver better. And I'm like, great, tell me about it because I want to enable it in the platform. But one piece, if I leave you with one answer today, it's that there's no one ring to rule them all. And I don't care how big your ring is or how much money you got in VC funding. There's not one software or one product or one company that's going to make this vision complete because it's about convergence.
Right. And so Autodesk's mission and focus and vision is to start to pull together all those components to kind of level set that across.
Yeah, I think we're talking and enabling the vision for this. And then we are outlining, my consultant business moved to the manufacturing consulting team here at Autodesk. We're working with companies like yours, like your owners, like your architects, to teach them, if you truly want to take advantage of not just our portfolio of products, but the platform approach, the connective tissue of how that generator enclosure, how that rack, how that riser, how that window wall system, how the best way is to conceptualize it up front as a real thing, and how to move it across with certainty of product and schedule and cost and sustainability. How do we create playbooks of these pieces and parts for you and what works for you based on your systems architecture of what you have? So like We've had this conversation. If you're using a piece that is not part of the anchor portfolio, you may not get to have the fullest benefit of the platform as it's fully connected. And it is connected today through BIM 360 and other things like Forge. But as that connectivity becomes more and more functional and enables things like more automation, more machine learning, more generative design, digital twins, as we are connecting all these pieces and parts, you will not be able to catch up because you didn't sort of come with the anchor tenant pieces to connect them together. So I'm teaching people that it's about this, more about the ecosystem and the platform and how that productization changes the way you work to make us all better, to bring up all boats, right? It's not about one person, one piece of software, one company. We all have to get better at this. We're not in first place. We all know that. We've seen enough charts about that.
Right, no doubt. So for all of our viewers, listeners, there is a Q&A box. Please send them in. We have a few. So Amy, one of them came in about could AI-powered productization open up the path for client-friendly building configurators? Interesting question, right? So how does that play? What does AI play into it?
So again, there's a difference between like what we have today and what we can have tomorrow. I think productization, again, because you're being able to think of something in a scalable capacity, right? So that rack or that riser now is just like, how would I best build this particular riser? But what's the scalable product line of risers? So like the generator, I can do that up front. When you can apply things like AI to that, I can look across every project I've ever used racks on and figure out the components that are most common in that rack in this particular type of building, and then say, listen, over the last 2,000 buildings that have been built like this, these racks tend to perform better than others. And we've had, especially when you move towards digital twins and you apply AI to that, like if you look at all the service components or all the end user experiences in that space, this is the rack you want to pick for the sustainability, end user experience, and preventative maintenance of that rack. And when you're talking to the client, you become powerful. Or if the client has that information, it's sort of like what we know as configurators versus what this is like configurators you've never imagined, right? Because they're not almost configurators, they're manifestations of living, breathing buildings that are giving you constant information and are connected to that in real time all the time, right? I'm getting information all the time to make that configurator better and better, right? So you may have seen that thing that we did at Bryden Woods at AU. And it's great. And they have a great they're calling it a platform because they have pieces and parts they basically put into a configurator. And even Jamie Johnson, who's a friend of mine, I said, Jamie, this is only for a finite number of things. And it's static, right? And he's like, yes, but it's a great proof point. And I'm like, as long as everyone understands that, like I used to go to easyclosets.com in 2005. They had a configurator to get my closet manufactured. That's also a configurator. We have to move past what you think of just combining things to understanding them with AI of setting real living, breathing parameters that make it the best choice at that exact moment in time with a projection of availability of pieces and parts in the manufacturing world,
Exactly. And so I think we've talked a lot about how your role in really pushing this into academia and really, some of the terms out there haven't been heard before. Are there options for formal education as it relates to it? And talk about, that convergence of both, the education side and the industry coming together.
So I believe in that, by the way. And so I'm actually looking to get my PhD at a university at the moment because I want to pick the right one that there really aren't many programs, if any, around, right? So I just spoke at SciFi at Stanford last week. They've got some things going on. I put together through Autodesk a curriculum for Columbia University that we're launching actually this spring. And we're going to be taking it to other groups. We work with the University of Florida, which is my undergrad alma mater. But we want to take, I personally believe that we have to educate the future of work, which lives within the universities. And we don't even know what these jobs are going to be called one day. Like,
Right.
are these data
Right.
engineers we're going to need? It probably is. You're going to need more data engineers. You're going to need more people that understand robotics and automation. But on site, we're going to need to understand, we have to be systems integrators. So like, what is, and if you actually, there's a great study called The Future of Work done by Ricks. And I wrote the forward when I first got to Autodesk for it. And it talks about like, what do these jobs actually look like in the future? What are the mega trends happening? That's great. But then we have to get in there. And I'm doing this, by the way, in my spare time because I believe in it. But I'm working with universities to create these curriculums and have guest speakers like yourself and other people come in so we can tell them what our needs are and get them to start teaching not just the software like they do now, but these concepts.
Right. And that's the building block, right? So it's got to start, there and start coming out. So, one of the questions that came up is how do we better eliminate the double work from like submittal review, redesign by the subs? We talked about it a little bit, but to me, this is like one of those things that are, the largest pet peeve about our business is the inefficiency of that, right? It just seems like it just drags the entire team in the wrong direction. So how does this start to happen?
The problem is it's not that inefficient. It is inefficient, but it's inefficient when someone's still getting paid for it, right? We haven't gotten so annoyed by it that we stopped paying for it, right?
Right.
That's the problem. Like by the way, nothing changes without dissatisfaction. I always talk about Dan Miller's formula for change. It obviously doesn't bother us that much because we haven't done anything about it really to the most, for most of us. But the issue is that, look, we all know that we're siloed. I was telling you a story recently about a mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer that I know. And they actually were talking about the fact that they wanted to burn their business to the ground 4 years ago. And they decided to do it because they felt like everything they drew got chucked in the garbage, right? And this is the president's words. We burned our business to the ground. Now they only do productization drawings for MEP subcontractors for the most part. They changed the model of their business because they realized we can only help the ecosystem if we change how we make money, right? Like we had to say, no, stop paying us for this. That's hard. By the way, if we become productized and you become systems integrators, what's a constructability review that a GC does now if everything is already done? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like actually it's like and to show you that, if you go to the next slide, the one in my deck, just interestingly enough, at 20, I'm trying to play crystal ball for a minute and it's not quite right. But like, what does your role do in the future that I just described in that vision when we have only partners, when maybe there's no more bidding, when everything happens because we did it in a real connected, enabled platform where I had a direct connection to that guy that made the product, right? It's like everyone, but what happens when you start fabricating your own things? Now you're both manufacturer and systems integrator, and maybe you're the designer up front. I don't know. So I can tell you this. I know that it's my responsibility to be the platform provider for you with tech. And not just software, with intellectual property and knowledge and things like that, right? I do know that, like, we all know we're siloed now, right? But I know that when you have all that pressure, right, that we showed in the Vice, what happens is the lines start to blur and you start to want to take control over the guy next to you because you can't control it and you want that value. It's sort of like Jeff Bezos says, your margin is my opportunity, right? So until somebody recognizes that and wants to take control, what they do is they start taking over the scope of the person next to them. But everybody becomes a vertical integrator somehow at that point. We do have the serial owners. By the way, lots of them are fabricating too. Don't get nervous. They can't get what they want from the ecosystem. So they're like, forget it. I'll just make up my own products for my data center and I'll just buy a factory to make it. Right?
Exactly.
So they become fabric. Everybody makes products, by the way, I think in the future state. And systems integrators become really important. And how good you are at becoming a systems integrator and your definition of that is really important. And then I think, interestingly enough, when I was making this chart, I couldn't think of any other word for designers other than designers. Like they become empowered, they become truly empowered designers, whoever they are, wherever that lives, right? I don't think it's linear anymore, but crazy.
Yeah, and so, really kind of the threat to not moving the needle is we're all sort of, each one of our pieces in the ecosystem has the opportunity for getting squeezed out, right? And how does, as people get smarter and more sophisticated, there's opportunities to pull pieces of this out that aren't as efficient and then just start to relate some of the components down. So you go back to the quote that's always out there, right? Evolve or die, right? So this is part of the business evolution, or whole hunks and pieces of it might just not be there.
And you know what's interesting about it? I think it's 100% true. I'm going to share a paper with you personally we talked about where I'm telling you, there are chunks of this ecosystem that literally just disappear off the face of the earth. If you think about, McKinsey said, 45% in the next 15 years of what we do is going to move towards industrialized construction. If you have $1 billion hospital and 45% of it is built with prefabricated pieces or productized pieces and parts, do you not need to know the in situ, how that's going to accept those pieces and parts, or what parameters you need? Like, everything moves to it then. It's 100%. I hate to say it. Like, if you're at 45%, you're past the tipping point. So the question you have to ask yourself now as a leader and as a leader of all your organizations is, what foundational skills and tools and technology do I need now? Am I ready for automation? Am I ready for technology? Am I ready for, robotics? Am I ready for, the culture changes I need? How is that going to affect the steps I go through with productization and then enabling that automation and connectedness in the platform through the cloud? Because ultimately we need reuse. And I don't mean just circular economy reuse. I mean, we need both digital and physical reuse. I was talking to a friend, a big VDC, a big general contractor. I won't tell you who, not yours. And he was like, I'm trying to figure out the metrics for my new VDC team. I was like, should I dish number of sheets or the number of this? And I was like, how about the newest metric should be like, everything I don't have to draw is a good thing. Like, how about like, right. Like, how come, why is the metric not, I don't have to draw it because I'm reusing so many things I've already drawn and productized? Maybe you should just, everything you don't have to draw, somebody gets an award, right? And because I asked him when we were talking about this, he was like showing me all this cool VD&C for a giant hospital. And I was like, great, how much of that can you reuse? And he, like, it's as if I hit him in the gut. It's like I tackled him, Craig, in rugby, because I'm a rugby player too. And an air came out of him and he said, wow, actually none of it. And I was shocked. I'm like, but not shocked.
Right.
Because he gets paid to make that. He's getting paid, right? He gets paid to make that. So he did. But he's not getting paid to figure out how to use it again. And like, that's on you, Drew. You've got to help guide that, incentivize your team to want to get to reuse and circular economy, right? For digital and physical.
Right. What's the application that's going to, again, drive the best value for the client, but also, make you, the most efficient in what you're doing. You don't have to touch everything again to redo it. So there's.
Look, at the end of the day, Drew, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's
you
okay.
are never going to do something great for the client if every time you do something for them, it's the first time you've ever done it.
Right.
How good are you going to get at it? Like, you have to get good at these things. So you need, if you really care about these clients, first of all, we all know it's safer. We all know it's more sustainable. We all know all that stuff. No one should be asking if we should be doing this. We get that. Everyone gets it. But it's like, if you truly care about your customer, don't you want to do the best job for them that you can? And if that's true, you can't be doing it like the first time every time. That makes no sense. You can never be the best at it, right? You're only going to be as good as you are at that moment.
Right, exactly. So one of the questions that came in relate back to the slide with the scale. So Aiden, if you could pull that back up and ask to elaborate a little bit more about the scales. There you go.
Yeah.
That one right there.
So I made this actually when I came to Autodesk, and I said, like, I'm so tired of hearing stories about housing and hospitality. Like, please stop. Like, please stop putting out stories about that. It's too much. We get it. Heads and beds, makes sense. Cellular apartments, I got it. Everyone understands. And we all know we need housing on this planet. But the problem is that's not where most prefabrication has been happening, other than single family homes, which, for the record, we know has not changed much of the whole entire of the ecosystem, because we've had modular housing for like 150, 200 years. So what is changing the ecosystem now is where the money is actually spent. And that's in all these other markets: industrial, data centers, manufacturing, healthcare, pharma, semiconductor. What's the commonality of those? The majority of the cost of those projects are MEP related, right? MEP in some structure. If you put that together, you're at 40 to 60, 70% of the building, right? And that's why, and by the way, those owners are usually manufacturing based, and they're like, I want certainty. I don't really, what's an estimate? Like, they want operational consistency over many geos, right? So usually that's what a serial owner is, not just because they build a lot of buildings. They need consistency for operational consistency over multiple geos, because really the money is made in the processes in that building, in the manufacturing shop, not in building the building for them, right? So you getting them a better price on something is not moving their needle. Them being able to operationally like ramp up without like waiting time and, earlier revenue recognition or whatever it is, or just certainty of it, right? Or being able to know the duration of construction. They can pick, like in semiconductor as an example, the latest technology at the last responsible moment, because they're certain about the schedule is going to be this. It's like the days of you moving like dirt around and getting steel up just to get paid have to stop, right? You might have to start later to end at the same time, so they can make technology choices up until the last second, right? And that's a good thing. But I think all of these are happening because they're usually heavy MEP, and they're usually, I don't want to say like smarter serial owners, but they're usually guys that come out and ladies that come out of manufacturing or oil and gas, or they come out of like healthcare. And there's a real driver for them for this. I mean, listen, healthcare is obvious at this point. Critical infrastructure is no longer roads, it's and transportation. It's literally data centers, the digital divide, healthcare, we need more hospital beds, and yes, also like water treatment. And it's like the whole notion of critical infrastructure has now changed. So you have to recognize what's on the rise.
Right. It's interesting too, because so my father-in-law is a 40 some odd year veteran in the auto industry from Michigan, right? And when I first met him, I kept asking him, well, like, what is your job? And he said, well, I really am on the lean side of the auto manufacturing. This is, okay, I understand lean. What does that mean? And trying to, his brain is set for productivity, for if there's a flaw in the application, how do I fix and find it? I mean, he comes to my kitchen, he comes to my house, and my kitchen's reorganized every time because it's not as efficient as it could be, right? So, when you look at the effects of what this overall, concept starts to bring, and that's why, to me, it relates to me somewhat to the automobile industry. But from a quality perspective in that final product, if someone's building my car in my driveway, it is not at all the same as if it's being delivered through, a robotic manufactured assembly line, and it's going to have some, obvious defects to the issue. It is being constructed, right? But, you look at that and you really look at, if you bought the first version, of a Tesla, right? You may have a few more issues, but as it goes on, it gets much more streamlined. So as a lot of this new tech and new business starts to evolve.
Cheaper.
You find out where those efficiencies start to pull, and that quality comes with it, right?
The problem is we're asking too much. By the way, you're like, I literally was on a call on a panel recently, and it was a VC firm, and they were like, we're going to take this new thing to a new country, and they're going to try it up against conventional. And if it's better, we're going to put money in it. And there was another guy on the panel, I won't say who. He literally said, that's the dumbest answer ever. Why do you think bringing a new product into a place where they've built something like for 500 years the same way, and all of a sudden it's going to somehow perform better than what those guys in that world are, you might as well forget it. Don't even try. It's kind of, that's the long game, right? So the issue is that it's not just about, and by the way, all of our tools for lean and things, listen up, lean guys and gals, lean doesn't get you prefab. In fact, lots of times lean stops you from getting prefab. So lean, all the tools, if you think about them, a lot of them are on the site because a bunch of construction guys and gals were like, let's think about lean. And they went directly to what they know, which is the site, not the manufacturing facilities. But they also thought, you know what, everything is in plumbing and everything's trade centric. Target value design is trade centric oftentimes. All the costs are trade centric in that, the pull plan is trade centric. Everyone with the contracts are get guys on the small group that don't fab, and they're not going to give up scope to a manufacturer. They just won't. I don't care what you say. They're not going back to Drew. Hey, Drew, just want to let you know we lost half the contract, but it's better for the whole entire project. They're not going back to their bosses to say that, right? So just because it's lean or just because it's AWP doesn't make it prefab. You know what I mean? You have to recognize that this is about holistic change, and it's about, I always say it's not hard to prefabricate. By the way, this is the best thing about meeting Drew for all of you out there, and I don't say this in every meeting, is that it's not hard to prefabricate a pipe. It's hard to find a culture, leadership, and enabled process that allows you to prefabricate that pipe, right? And a lot of it is about culture and leadership and changing process and thinking about things differently. So I give you a lot of credit, honestly, Drew, since we've just met over a few times. But honestly, that's more important than knowing how to prefabricate a pipe, because guess what? Nothing anyone's fabricating these days has been done for the first time ever. It's just not, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you're in a great spot. You need great leadership.
Well, and it's great. We have, our owner's really one that drives it, and he drives hard. But that's where you get, right? You do 10 projects. You might, if you're lucky, one of them, kind of pushes the boundary. And how do we keep that up? And it's interesting because we talk about MEP all the time, right? And MEP, prefab, those things start to go together. You can look at skin and structure, but a lot of our clients and our trade partners that are listening today, or really out there that we're working with, are finished trades. So one of the questions is, and to me, this is an easy one, right? But where do you see the drywall ceiling transitioning to prefab or to some module construction, and how do you see that starting to happen?
It's funny. Yeah, that other part's obvious. They're not productizing. Don't let them off the hook so easy yet, the other guys,
right.
MEP guys. But I'll tell you, I was just on the phone with a drywall contractor that I've worked with for many years with Autodesk, and he was saying to my Autodesk rep, I'm not a contractor. Like, you keep talking to me about contracting, like the way in which you talk to he's like, I'm a manufacturer now, because they're utilizing, roll forming equipment. They have all this machinery. They're doing all these pre-cut, pre-drilled, all this exterior, interior wall panels, ceiling panels, curved shapes and things like that. They have a whole productization strategy we put together for them a few years ago. And he actually said, which is great, he said, all of what's in the landfills these days, and I always use the term like it's like 40, I think it's 40% of what's in the landfills are construction waste. He actually said it, and then he knew the number. He knew the number actually about what percentage are from his particular ecosystem or industry. He was like, of that 40%, X amount, I forget, it was very high, is from, drywall being cut and like framing and all that stuff. And so when I remember when we first set up his business, and they were a conventional contractor that decided to open up a fab business. He was trying to understand not just things he could productize for the walls and the ceilings, and he also understood that all these pieces and parts that we just called out need to be connected. And a lot of times what he used to get, because a lot of them have drywall on them now, they have framing on them now, like he would price things in linear foot, but now he's making a connection price, right? Because like he's only doing the little gap fill pieces that no one's going to do in a lot of these cases around the products as well as the products he makes. And so I think the drywall contractor, I don't talk about them enough. Framing and drywall guys, I think, will be also, if you're not careful, a little more of the integrators out there. You gotta know who the good ones are, but they are productizing things all the time. I mean, if you think about even stuff like, I don't like to call too many clients out, but there was a big healthcare job that they were doing little small renovation spaces, and they decided they were going to have a kit of parts, right? Of just, and not much of it had MEP. They came to me and I was like, there's not a lot of MEP in this. It's all mostly finished stuff, but doesn't mean it couldn't be done. It can. They had just a kit of parts. They were going across the country doing all these little medical renovations with just a kit of parts. If it didn't fit that, they didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like right. they made it so, and they made it super efficient for themselves.
So the term integrator has been a question that's come up a few times, right? And really, what does that term mean, and how does it apply to like the VC side of our business and BIM, and how do all these, the virtual sides start to come together to really push this movement forward?
I think you're in a really interesting position right now as general contractors or builders. It's a very short window of opportunity. Take it for what it's worth, believe it or not. I can tell you right now, I talk to a lot of general contractors that they're trying to figure out what their new position in the new world is. And by the way, for the moment, you have a little bit of disconnect between the serial owners and the MEP manufacturers, let's call them for a minute, right? And those manufacturers have a little bit of a learning curve to productize. They have a little bit of a learning curve of how to talk about DFMA up front directly to the owners and playbooks and also to the architects. But that's not going to last long. Like currently, you as a general contractor or design builder can fill the systems integrator role as this evolves, right?
Right.
I will tell you, I know this because I already know owners that are leapfrogging over general contractors and architects. They are already going directly to the MEP subcontractors. They are spending the money and time and effort to productize those people's offerings because they need them. And they are now being put in as owner furnished equipment, and they will no longer be part of a choice that an architect makes or a general contractor makes, and they will not design them or buy them. That's happening now. So let's look at my crystal ball. If that's happening now, and it continues to go like that, where is your role? Right now, you have a short window of opportunity to insert yourself and be like, hold on a minute, you don't need to productize with my subs. I know how to productize. By the way, not only will I know how to productize them, I told you 65% of that hospital needs to accept those pieces and parts. So not only can I help my supply chain productize and explain the value to you, and I can show you the best integration with all the in situ pieces and parts and the way and the tolerances and everything we need to know, and the equipment and the accelerated assembly methodology that doesn't exist today for all those pieces and parts. So, but it's a small window, Drew, for value, right? Yeah. And it's almost like it's a grab for value right now. So you have to hold on to the part, and you have to build foundational skills, and that's with technology, that's with training and process, that's with lots of things, equipment, to be there, right?
Yeah, and I think we're in an interesting time where, the access to capital and really good capital is there, right? And so, yeah. It's time to make, those investments, see where you can really take that opportunity and scale it forward. So,
Us too.
One of the right, and so when you look at the full MEP and separating all those things, like that stuff's easily gonna start to push away. But what's your most, like, what are you most excited about as you look for the future state of this? Like when you sit down and go, okay, if I have my way, how is this coming forward, and what makes you most excited about it?
Oof, it's hard not to talk about my red shoe, like when I think about that, right? Like
Right, yeah, it's a good one.
like, I don't know, like everyone asks me about my red shoe, but like, so I always use this as my story. Like, you know, back in the day, in the olden days, way before Peter Lamb, Frenchie and I lived on the same block, I used to go buy my shoes. I would walk down barefoot to my shoemaker and I'd put my foot down on paper and they would draw a line around my toes. And I'd say like, oh, I kind of want it to be red. I'm not quite sure. And he goes, don't worry about it. I got to go to the market. We'll see what color leather they have and how much it is. And I go, how much is it going to cost? He's like, I don't know. I have to go to the market and figure it out first. And I go, how long is it going to take? He's like, it depends on what's available and how long it takes me to, how much labor goes in. He's like, come back in 2-3 weeks. I go, okay, great. And I walk away. I come back. It's a different cost than I was hoping for. It doesn't look quite like what I wanted, you know, whatever. That's my shoe. It's called my shoe. That's kind of how we build and design buildings now, for the most part. In order to change that, this is my shoe. I bought it online. It's an 8.5. I asked for the parameters of a 4-inch high heel, patent red leather. I want it to be within a certain cost, and I want it to come prime. So I wanted it within 2 days. So like Santa Claus delivered my red shoe to my house when I wanted it, and I wanted it from a 5-star, you know, manufacturer. And I put all those parameters in myself. My shoe is now an 8.5 because there's a connected, enabled platform that you can have a direct connection with designers and makers, buyers and sellers for that product, right? For those things. And not only that, but it also said, you should buy this shoe, this shirt, these socks, and this necklace. That makes the best, you know, outfit. Think generative design, right? And by the way, based on your previous buying preferences, we know you like these brands. You should buy these brands that fit with that shoe. So like the thing I'm most excited about, which is why I came to Autodesk, is that truly Autodesk recognizes that we have to be a platform company that enables this connected, not just like, you know, connection through BIM 360 or connection through Forge, but this truly vision of a platform connected, enabled place where I can have certainty for both, you know, safety and cost and schedule and sustainability. To me, I just want to buy my shoe and have it come in 2 days if I'm the customer. I came to Autodesk because I think we, along with you, our partners, can make that happen.
Right. How do you simplify that experience, right? That's really what it drills down to.
Who's not happy right now? Wait, who's not happy in COVID right now when Amazon comes to your door? Like every single one.
Amazon comes to my door a lot, often, multiple times a day, right? And so I think to me, that's great. That is the evolution that we got to bring, you know, forward to our business. So, well, we're just about out of time. And Amy, like I had told you, this is fun discussion for me. We could go on for probably a couple more hours talking about it. But, you know, really, really appreciate your time. You know, your intelligence level on this is really unmatched in a lot of places. And so thank you so much for, you know, taking the time, really trying to break it down. I'm sure there'll be more follow-up that we'll have that'll add on to this, but it's been really an interesting conversation.
It's actually been my pleasure getting to know you and HIT. So honestly, I'm looking forward to spending more time with you guys. And you guys are doing great stuff. You have great leadership.
Great, thank you. And for everybody, the content for today will be shared, you know, the post-event along with a survey. Please take your time to fill it out. Other than that, please stay tuned for the next announcement for our Master Series. And we look forward to hearing and hopefully seeing some of this, you know, push forward out there, you know, on the projects today. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.